Good morning, good day, good evening, honored listeners and viewers and audience. Today is the Dandelion Reflections episode 11. And let us welcome Caroline, our
Hi.
guest, or our or my guest host.
Yes, we're each other's guests, yeah, and co-hosts
Yeah,
and friends. Yes, that's a pleasure
and
to be here. Yes.
pleasure to be with you too. And today's topic is something that we already, before we started this recording, had a laugh about. Let's just say it's about labeling. And
Yeah.
this is such a huge and interesting, I love this topic, really. And we label all the time, um, it seems like, and I think that's pretty puts it that puts it pretty to the pretty well. I'm labeling right now. See, I'm labeling myself now because I can't get this introduction right. I
You,
I'm labeling. I ruined the introduction, so there's a label, but on my forehead.
great. Experiential. This is great.
Yes, so it's
Yeah.
about labeling. And Caroline, you have a wonderful quote we thought we would share right in the beginning to drop the bomb.
Yes, and I'm going to paraphrase Ramdas and Krishnamurti, possibly both of them, because they had the same idea in mind when they wanted to convey that when we are nobody or nothing, we can be anything.
And just hit the rewind button for a second and just take that in once more if you would like. I
Yeah, when we,
think
Mhm.
this is so important.
It's
So
profound. Yeah.
it is really profound, yeah.
So in this podcast, we would like to invite everyone to look at their own labels and identities and how they feel about shedding any of that and see if there's actually a possibility to access more of themselves. So it sounds
Mhm.
paradoxical, right? Well, if I'm not like this um, famous singer or writer or teacher or doctor or lawyer, what am I? Because when people lose their jobs, often they are facing an identity crisis. Or when people retire, oh, I'm not going to have this role. Like when I go to the office, I'm known as such and such, and I'm having this role. So it's something we're confronted with sooner or later.
Right. So if we would go back, I love this game, 50,000 years,
Yes.
um, when our brains
Mhm.
developed to the stage they are now, basically. What in what way did labeling help us then?
Mhm. It's I think it's part of a normal tendency that we have to categorize, to make generalizations, because it helps us feel more secure, safe when we can actually label something or someone, or it belongs to this category. So if we know that it belongs to a certain category, we can assign certain attributes, and therefore we feel like we know more what to expect.
Yes.
Really about dealing with fear and insecurity, I believe, and the uncertainty. But
Hmm.
it's not right because a person is never their labels, or it's not all there is to a person. In fact, it can be limiting, right? We learned that in the Inside Out group with Uncle Bill, like how limiting it is to just be stuck in that view.
Our um, our brain is one of the most energy guzzling parts of our brain, parts of our body. I'm sorry,
Well
and
said.
so of course it should. be normal, that it invents um, tools to save energy, and categorizing is one of these tools to save energy, to get to conclusions quickly. It
Yes.
doesn't, of course, that means since you we are only uh, limited to certain categories, good and bad, edible or not, danger or not, um, we are very limited in the outcome. So
Yes.
to make a finer categorization, it takes time, and we don't often have that, and it takes energy, which we also don't have all the time, especially
Yes.
not in dangerous situations. This is the often quoted saber-toothed tiger. If that's running after you, you don't really have time to think and review your situation. You just run to survive. And in social groups, again, we touched that before in the earlier episodes. Um, when you're outside of your group, your tribe, because of your misbehavior, uh, then you're doomed to yeah, in the worst case, die. And so you, of course, you need to categorize if you fit in into that tribe. And you look at people, you try to label their their behavior, their mimics and body language to know, okay, I'm safe or not. Did I get
What,
that right?
yes, and what you said here is has implications because when we label, that means we judge. There's a judgment attached to the label, which is contrary to the philosophy of seeing something and experience a person in their totality.
Hmm.
So judgment is an obstacle to actually being present because with the judgment, there's a story, there's a category, you know. And so that's important to realize how limited it is. And yes, our brain does that. Like you said, it's like our ego, this that side of the brain that's been kind of that has evolved to help us cope with the uncertainty, to categorize as an energy efficient way to feel safe. And it also stems, I think, from the hierarchical structures because think about in an organization, in a workplace, there's an hierarchy, but there's a name, there's a label attached to everyone's job, right? So that kind of made it a little bit worse, I think.
Hmm.
We're moving towards something more circular, more, I think, an approach where people collaborate more, and these labels hopefully won't matter that much. But yeah, I think labels and judgments are tied together, and that's why labels can be actually have a vicious effect because of the judgment and the consequences of that judgment.
Hmm. Before we go into those, you named the ego.
Mm-hmm.
I think we both agree that that is a very crucial part of it. What would you say? Where does the ego
Mm-hmm.
get in there?
Yeah, I have an example, personal life example, to demonstrate what it was for me and um, how my relationship with my ego changed. I was at a meditation retreat for about 48 hours, and it was my first retreat ever. It was a silent retreat, and I had heard so many great things about that silent retreat, not this specifically that one, but silent retreats in general. And I was relatively new to the meditation practice that I had started. But being a psychiatrist and believing in the, you know, the plasticity of the brain and trying to expand coping skills, then and coping with my own struggles and life challenges, I decided to go. And at that moment, after a few meditations, that day, I realized something. I really felt like it sounds gonna sound weird, but I had been like in my job trying to climb the ladder in academia, and it's all about roles and labels there, right? It's all about accomplishments, and your value is measured by the number of publications or accomplishments or innovations that you come up with. And I remember sitting in a meditation, and it just kind of it didn't matter anymore. I
Wow.
could feel it. It was it's going to sound weird, but I felt my ego dissolving. There's only one way I can explain it, and that's it. Of course, I revert back to some tendencies sometimes when I'm very stressed. My ego takes over, and engage in polarizations I might be dragged into. But I'm quicker to realize it now. But that moment has been a turning point in my life. I felt it dissolve. I felt like it didn't matter. I became a nobody, like Randa said. And
Yes.
it became so vast now, the space ahead of me, the horizon. It was wonderful. I hope everyone can go through this, can experience this feeling of liberation from the ego.
I would love to expand on this, but let's take a moment to talk about how the moment we take that sticker and put it on our own forehead, on the other people's foreheads, on situations, on whatever. This is this. You are this. I am this. So
Yes.
let's take a look at some very maybe a situation that is very common for or that most people can relate. A relational discussion. Let's say uh, let's say a partner comes home, is stressed from work, and meets the other partner who is maybe stressed from chores at home or the kids or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
these two individuals, universes,
Yeah.
crash into each other, and suddenly there's this labeling, you, and then what
Mm-hmm.
happens then?
Yeah, so that's a very important aspect of this discussion, Christopher. Thank you for bringing that up because it's really how labeling affects dynamics and intimate relationships, right? Because suddenly one has the role, the one of the one can be like the victim, the other one the rescuer, and when we start pointing fingers, we cast ourselves unconsciously often into those roles that are very again limiting and constraining. And yeah, there might be some silent labels going on in our heads during those interactions. So, oh yeah, we know you're always the one who minimizes. Yeah, you're the one who dramatizes. So there's the melodramatic, the passive, for instance. Does
Mhm.
it ring a bell for anyone? I mean, yeah, so
Who
it's important.
cannot relate to this? I'm sure every one of us can, and our audience can really relate to situations like this on work or at home.
Yeah, that's the theater of life. But once we can pause, take a step back and realize, okay, this is what's playing out right now. We're caught in those archetypes. That's another label, whatever. Archetypes, roles, blah, 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 myths. We're enacting something. Um, we can decide to not identify with that role because that's another pernicious or kind of insidious effect of labels is like we identify with them. That's what the ego does. We believe the story about the label and we incorporate it in our identity. Oh yeah, I'm always this like unstable,
Mm,
grumpy, whatever, because that's the effect of labels. And it affects the brain, it affects the identity. So we need to pause and say, hey, wait a minute.
you're right.
I want this. I have a choice. I am
And don't, I'm sorry, but isn't it true that we sometimes feel very, very comfortable in doing this,
yes.
in labeling ourselves into being a victim or in being the uh, the persecutor or the what was the other one? Um,
Rescuer, victim.
right, exactly.
Well, it is comforting because it's familiar. We don't
Yes,
have to question it,
exactly. Thank you.
right? It's easier, it's familiar. But with effort and with tolerating the unknown, then we can discover so much more, and we can grow. That's the thing. It's more evolutive to pause and shedding those labels.
A very important step that you just named to pause.
Right. Yes.
And this is, again, we've mentioned this many times before, but it is crucial. We're in this fight, and we think, oh no, we have to go on in this track and rectify ourselves or keep on blaming the other one to make our own ego bigger. No, cut it. Walk away for just a minute or 5 minutes, of course, with
Yeah.
the consent of the other one.
Yes, exactly. It's, shedding, one thing it does too, just like decluttering a home. Imagine you declutter a
Hmm.
home, then you know what you have, right? You know,
Right.
same for the mind. If we
Oh,
shed those, we have clarity about who we are really and where we're going.
right.
Those labels usually occlude something. We can't see clearly because it's just cluttered.
So this, where can I have this thought that these roles and these labels, we take those from earlier programmings, from earlier um,
Yes.
experiences, and we we like magic, they come up in the right moment, and
Yeah.
we fall into the same pattern that we have done, or that maybe that our parents have done, or that we know from earlier uh, relationships, and then that we're there again, and it's so convenient and energy efficient.
Yes. You're right. It is programming. Imagine, go back in childhood, everyone. Like, how were you labeled by your parents? I know I was labeled the quiet one, the
Oh,
studious, and my sister was like the clown and the active one. But I'm like, I have a clownish side to me, and I need to be active too. I can't only be like, behind my, hide behind my books. And so it's limiting, but parents do that naturally because again it's efficient, like, oh, it's easier, like we figured that out, that kid already, how they are, and the other one,
hmm.
we interact with them because with those labels come a set of scripts or instruction manuals, so to speak. So, and the parents also, my parents, I know, like, they would attach some meaning to what someone did in life, and so the social role was important and other things too. And we can think about that, but also gender. We can think about
Yeah.
culture, race, all of that. Those are labels too. Those are intersectional identities. So we can have thousands of them trying to get closer and closer to who we are, but it's like an asymptote. It's we will never get to the truth of a person with only labels, no matter
Right.
how.
And that happens all the time. And the highest, maybe not highest role models we have, but the often idolized people in around us, like celebrities or politicians,
Yeah.
they do that, exactly that, all the
Yes.
time. And okay, of course, it's understandable that we do the same thing because it's common, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So now let's see. I'm sorry, you
No,
wanted
go
to say too. So, okay, now we become aware of this in the heat of the moment, ideally, and we see, oh my God, I'm labeling myself, or
ahead.
I'm labeling the other person, my superior, my partner, my children, my parents. And
Mhm.
So you mentioned this wonderful quote by Ramdas. So what happens the moment we let these labels go? We shed. So this involvement of nothing,
Yeah, yeah,
I would like to say.
yeah.
So what happens then? What door opens? What are the possibilities now?
This is beautiful. Yes, there are doors that open in terms of the possibilities or the expansion of a person's um, yeah gifts and talents and potential. And there's also the way we relate to one another. Now that there's someone will realize that I'm nobody. I'm not this role, this label, this diploma, this credential, whatever. I'm not my bank account. I'm not the car I own. Then I can relate to another person in a very authentic way,
Hmm.
also, from essence to essence. So that there's a shift also interpersonally that happens. So, and that's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
really, anyway, that's one of the things I've noticed. And yeah, what do you think?
This sentence, short but powerful. I'm nobody.
Hmm.
If you're used to being in the old world,
Yeah,
if you're used to labeling, if you're used to your uh, labels making your determining your self-worth, that could
yeah.
be quite challenging for many people, right? It could be even throw you down a cliff in a way of your
Yeah,
self-esteem.
yeah, because many of us at some point or another, we lose touch with who we really are. So we cling onto these roles, these labels, and it's basically we have this invisible like ID attached or something written on our foreheads that really defines who we are. We think it defines who we are, but sometimes it's worth it to just do a test and go somewhere where you're not known by anyone. You don't have a story attached to you. And I'm doing that all the time when I travel, and it's actually
Oh,
wonderful.
cool.
That's one of my favorite things about traveling is like I'm anonymous. I'm no longer Dr. Giroux or mother or friend or daughter or colleague. I am just, that's it, a human being. I'm a nobody. It feels good because there's no pressure. There's no crushing expectations because with all of these labels and roles, there's an expectation that comes with that. So it's nice to take a break of that sometimes. I would encourage everyone to make that experiment, yeah.
That's
So
beautiful. Yeah.
the anonymity, we realize that there's a lot there, even though we think it's empty. No, that's another paradox in life. It's like in emptiness, there's fullness, and in fullness, there's also emptiness.
Yeah.
So in nothingness, there is everything.
So what is possible now when you really let go of all these labels?
I feel like for me personally, and I know this in others who have gone through some journey, and we know some of these people, right?
Hmm.
Then you start paying attention to the whispers of your soul. What is it that I really want? What is it that I'm meant to accomplish on this earth, or accomplish, or be, or or experience?
Hmm.
Pay attention more to what is aligned to our nature, and then we go in that direction. We don't follow the script of the role anymore. So that's what I feel is even happening for me, and I've seen that in others.
So that let me think. This is actually very interesting because then would it would it open another door for starting a whole new life?
Yes, it could be. Yeah, good. Absolutely. Because it is life changing. It has been for me. It doesn't always show on the surface, but there's some deep change that can happen. There's a shift in how we approach life, how we approach situations. We can actually look less stressed when we are in that kind of state of mind
Hmm.
because we don't have those pressure anymore, and we feel like our life is so valuable and we want to make the best out of it, but not following someone else's agenda anymore or the society, but our own. And we pay attention to our own rhythms and
Hmm.
pace. So there might be a sense of peace. We might look, actually, those people might look radiant, look, oh my gosh, they're inspiring. So yeah, this is, these are manifestations of that shift.
Somehow I have a picture in my mind of a teacher, uh, a normal school teacher, and maybe many of you in our audience have a certain teacher in mind that you have experienced in any time of your life that was so unfazed by the most disrespectful behavior of students or a colleague or a superior or whatever who really burst out whatever
Mm.
negative labels on you or on this person that you're thinking of. And this, well, of course, on the outside is something else than in the inside. But from the outside, we see this person who very calmly takes whatever comes from the other disrespectful person. And it just, like if you had a raincoat on, it
Mm.
just disappears.
Oh
This
my.
doesn't, this isn't me. These words, these labels, I can choose, since I have this freedom, I can choose not to have the need um, to fight against these labels to rectify myself. But just they just fly past you like a cloud. They just drop off you, like the raincoat.
I love this analogy. So that's exactly it. They're like the raindrops on the raincoat. They just don't soak you. They just barely touch you. And that's, yeah, that's one of the signs that someone is no longer identified with the labels or egos, or because you know who you are and you know you're nothing and you can be everything or anything you want, but you're not what others
Exactly.
decide. Yeah, they're not what others decide. So those insults don't, reach the
Hmm.
person anymore.
I had a very interesting uh, talk with a client uh, not too long ago, and he told me about a situation from his school time, and he told me about a teacher that in the first days of he when this client as a child came into the class, the teacher already labeled him as, oh, this is nothing. You're not going to make it anywhere. If you're lucky, you're going to make it into somewhere city uh, council job. And this this
Yes.
label from this teacher
Mhm.
stayed with my client for 40 years. Unbelievable. And we were exploring. So what was the
Mhm.
growing bed? What was the growing, um, how do you say, the soil that made this seed from this teacher, this label, grow so well in you?
Mhm.
So that was so interesting to explore that. So we all have this soil in us that makes some seeds grow well and
Mhm.
other seeds not so well. Interesting if from my own experience, I have for a long time had a big difficulties of taking in positive words about me. And I really had a hard time with that. Of course, it was much easier to take in negative words. And it's funny how we, or well, maybe it's not funny, but it's actually interesting how this comes.
Mm. And maybe there are some, yeah, conditionings too, like it's not okay to recognize the good in us sometimes or to admit, right? So that could have been a programming. And
Mm,
it's, yeah, it's very important again to pause and decide, like, okay, what is really coming from me or others, or what does that label really resonate or not? I mean, giving ourselves the choice. And yeah, I love the analogy of the soil and then the conditions around where we can grow, and those judgments, premature judgments that you just mentioned, like this teacher, it happens so many times in history. And the opposite too. You tell someone you are so talented and I believe in you, that will affect positively the development of that person.
yes.
Um, and similarly, when we have those negative biases, because a label become a bias, then it can stunt someone's development. So it can have damages and delay a person's blooming process.
Mm,
Yeah, so that's very powerful. And I see that also in my practice as a physician. I'm very careful with the diagnosis because, again, a diagnosis becomes embedded in an identity. And when I try to de-diagnose people, sometimes they're not happy with me. What? You're telling me that I'm not bipolar? I've lived all these decades of my life thinking I was bipolar, and now I'm not. I'm like, you should be happy. This is good news. Bipolar disorder can be a severe disorder. You are not that. You just have a bubbly personality, which is great, which is positive. So it takes some adjustment. So even
yes.
this that is stigmatized takes some space in the identity, and if you remove that from people, it's like creates a vacuum, and they're very insecure. So yeah, it's interesting. So even for you trying to take in something positive or removing something negative, it's similar. It's like you maybe had conceptualized yourself a certain way, and it didn't match. It couldn't it it created a dissonance with the positive that actually
Yes.
was thought of you, and that you are. So
That's so interesting. So we can really build a whole personality around someone else putting a label onto us for being, I don't know, autistic or bipolar or
yeah,
whatever.
yes,
Well,
yeah, yeah,
that's those are really grave consequences. And
yeah.
I'm not sure that many uh, of your profession really think the whole way through as in the way that you do, what these consequences can mean for people.
No, because then they have treatments that are not only unnecessary but can be harmful because they
Right.
have side effects. And again, I had another situation like that yesterday. Exactly that. This woman had side effects from medication. She said I was diagnosed with bipolar. I said, tell me about this. Why?
Hmm.
She did criteria for bipolar disorder. In fact, she had PTSD. She had suffered trauma. And I said, you're
Oh,
not. And this is, yeah, we'll take you off this medication. And this is another one that's more appropriate and with less side effects that will target your PTSD that has not been addressed.
that's huge.
This is bread and butter for me. I see that all the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So we have to be thoughtful and mindful in everything we do in
Who
order.
was it?
Huh?
I'm sorry. Who
Who was
I was who was it who was quoted with if you think you're no, what was it again? Um, Sometimes if you think you're crazy, you should look if you're not surrounded by, I'm sorry, this is a quote, assholes or idiots or something like that.
uh-huh.
It's a so who was that?
I don't know. It sounds familiar though.
Was
Like,
it some famous psychologist, psychiatrist? Was it? It was not Adler, that's for sure. Ah well, let me look it up afterwards.
you can look into it, put it in the description.
Yeah. So, well, however, it's this labeling. is,
Yeah.
and this quote that I don't really recall right now, but I think this quote goes both sides, right? Uh, the one we ourselves who are labeling ourselves and others who are labeling ourselves, we take this in and believe it.
Right. Yes.
And as long as we don't take this in as truth,
Hmm.
then we will we cannot be labeled. We label ourselves or believe others' labels. So that's something very important.
Yes. And then we create a story around that label, and then we react to anything that will threaten that label and that story. And that can create some polarization and serious conflicts with others. So it has various implications. Yeah.
So what I hear you saying there is even if it's a negative label for us that we have put on ourselves or have received and accepted by others, um, we fight to keep this label.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's part of our identity. And we feel like if we don't have this identity or any identity, we're nothing. And if we're nothing, we don't exist.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we have to,
that's huge.
it's huge. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. So when we now have realized that we can draw a blank paper out of our
Hmm.
pocket and okay, this is my new
Yeah.
I. This is my new ego. Just
Yeah.
for 5 minutes, of course. This doesn't work all the time and the whole day and the whole week, but just for 5 minutes, if we manage to be able to uh, turn the page to a blank page and write, okay, this is me. This is
Hmm.
who I want to be, not
Hmm.
who I feel comfortable with, but who I want to be.
Yes. And like you,
Everything is possible, right?
yes. And to quote you, you are the creator of your life. You say that,
Yes.
right?
Thank
You
you.
can, it's how we can be the creator is having this blank page
Mm,
and tolerating the silence for a minute and see what will arise. Yes.
exactly. And I'm not exaggerating here. Anything is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing. You can have
Yeah.
lived in a certain belief in many years until you realize, oh, that's not me. That's
Mm.
someone else's labels. That's someone else's expectations.
Yeah. And it's never too late to come to that realization
Hmm.
and our power and let go of those labels. They are baggage that are, you know, weighing us down
Hmm.
and clouding the horizon where we are supposed to go.
It's unbelievable, I must say. It blows my mind how how huge the possibilities are, even and implications for your personal health, not only mental health, but
Yes. Yeah.
physical health. Even
Yeah.
like I've listened to a podcast with Dr. Bruce Lipton a few weeks ago, and he said similar things about patients getting a cancer diagnosis
Mm.
by a physician, and they they take this the patients take this label, I have cancer, and
Mm.
that's their new
Yeah.
thing to live by, and their
Yes.
new label,
Hmm.
instead of saying I'm healthy.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm not a physician, so don't get me wrong. Um, I don't want to get into something that I have no clue about, like cancer diagnosis. But the idea of being sick and being healthy, these are two very different ways, and I think that's very important. And even if you realize that there have been what are they called again? cases where you have been people have been declared fully healthy, and no one really knows why.
Yes. The power of,
There's
right?
exactly what did you say?
Yeah, the power of the mind over recovery or a diagnosis or
Yes, yes. Spontaneous. What was it? Something was spontaneous.
a
Oh,
recovery or remission, spontaneous
yes, yes,
remission.
exactly. That's what it was.
I've heard that too. And you're emphasizing another important example or phenomenon. And I have an aunt who is an example of that, is really not identifying with the sick role.
Mm,
And yes, you have an illness, but it's there. There is an illness. It's not I am ill or I have an illness. It's like there is a symptom, there is an illness, yet I do this, I am this, and this,
mm,
my aunt is a watercolor painter, and she also had been diagnosed with a condition, but she talked about it, was not in denial of it, yet her life focus was not on that. She
mm,
said, this is not going to win over me. I am doing this, and this is powerful. And I can see that it has helped her achieve remission, actually.
wow.
Yes.
That
So,
reminds. I'm sorry.
mhm. No, go ahead.
That reminds me of another thing that I sometimes use in with clients. Uh, Instead of having this inner monologue,
Hmm.
I am sick,
Yeah.
I am depressive, I am uh, whatever, that we say, I feel
Hmm.
sick, I feel. It's a completely different meaning.
Yeah. Because you don't own it, but a feeling will pass. If you say I am, it becomes a
Yes.
state. It feels permanent. But I
Hmm.
feel it's kind of even the sound of it,
Hmm.
thing that moves, and we want the feeling to go through us. It's an energy. It's
Yes.
not a permanent state. Yes, that's a good strategy, a good shift. Yes.
And it's so easy. We can do that whenever we remember doing it, and
Yes.
it's like a snap of a finger. And your life, or it like at least in that minute, your life can really be different if you realize that you are not your
Mm-hmm.
diagnose, you
Mm-hmm.
are not your the labels that you and others are putting on yourselves, or that you put on others, right? That happens also with that we label others, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe we realize, oh, I'm labeling you. I'm sorry, this was not right. Oh, I mean, and then we can rephrase it or reframe it or just let go of it altogether.
Yes. And just saying something like, I see you, rather than you are this or that, I see you.
Hmm.
Or saying, I am this or that, I am. So that's Deepak Chopra in one of his meditations. It was so powerful too.
Hmm.
That was another way to shed the identities. It was just saying, I am. I am.
Yes, exactly.
Simply and totally. I am. It's a
Period.
beautiful. Yeah, period. I am.
That is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I am. So, before we end this episode, is there anything more you would like to let our audience know?
I think we covered a lot of ground. I can't think of anything else. I'm sure there is more, of course, but it's a process, I could say. It's a
It is.
process. It's never necessarily a straight line. Sometimes we revert back into those comfortable identities like old slippers, and
Hmm.
but the more we practice pausing and detaching from the emotional states, from the labels, the more we find their space within us and around us.
And if it doesn't go fast enough, if your life doesn't change fast enough, if you can't let go of these labels fast enough, then remember you're labeling again. You're labeling yourself. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh,
You
I'm
judge.
not.
No, let go of the judgment too. Yes.
Judgment, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Hmm.
wonderful. And I say it again, I am.
I am.
And now, Caroline, this beautiful ending. Would you recite this quote again by
Yes.
Ramdas?
When we are nobody or nothing, we can be anything or
Right.
anyone. Yeah. We can be everything actually. When we are nobody or nothing, we can be everything.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Beautiful ending words. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Caroline.
Thank you, Christopher.
And
Always energizing and delightful to chat with you.
yes, same to you.
And
And
well,
thanks for everyone who joined us today. And we're very happy to have you here. And if you liked what you heard today, and so leave us a like, please. And thanks for following us. And thanks for sharing this episode with someone that you think of that could have use of it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Bye.